Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Staff Hearing Officer meeting for February 4th, 2026. My name is Tess Harris, and I'm the Staff Hearing Officer for today's meeting. I'll go through first. We'll open it up for public comment for items that are not on the agenda today. Ms. Carmen, do we have any members of the public?
Thank you, Ms. Harris. At this time, I believe both the participants in the room are applicants, so I don't think we have any members of the public with us. So I'll move to virtual participation, which we don't have anyone online with us, and we did not receive any written correspondence under general, so I'll give it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Carmen. We'll now go into preliminary matters, requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of agenda items. We have not received any. Again, and then item 1B, announcements and appeals. Additionally, I don't have any announcements today, and we have not received any appeals for staff hearing officer items. And then I took it a bit out of order, but comments, item 1C we did before 1A and 1B. So now I'm going to move into item 2, which is the project on today's staff hearing officer agenda. We have one project today that we'll be reviewing for 44 through 46 Ocean View Avenue. I will go ahead and read the project description into the record on the slides, and then I will turn it over to staff for a brief presentation. This is for a modification and also a coastal development permit declaration, depending on the modifications approval. So pursuant to Santa Barbara Municipal Code 28.44110, when a proposed development involves the addition of an ADU, the application shall be reviewed by the staff hearing officer without a public hearing in accordance with subdivision J of the government code, 65852.2. The staff hearing officer shall not issue a decision on the application until at least 10 calendar days after notice has been provided to the public. The staff hearing officer may receive and consider written comments from the public, but without a public hearing. The announced decision will be the final act of the city on the ADU. And we did not receive any public comments for this item. The 0.26 acre lot at 44 Ocean View Avenue is currently developed with a 2-story residence, 2 one-story single unit residences, and a 3-car carport. The 0.25 acre lot at 46 Ocean View Avenue is currently developed with a 2-story duplex, a 1-story single unit residence, and 5 uncovered parking spaces. The project consists of replacing the existing carport at 44 Ocean View Avenue with a single-story special accessory dwelling unit and permitting an ADU pursuant to Assembly Bill number 2533. Improvements to 46 Ocean View Avenue consist of replacing the uncovered parking area with 2 attached single-story special ADUs. Associated improvements include revising the parking configuration on both lots to accommodate the ADUs. The discretionary applications under my purview as the staff hearing officer for this hearing are a modification to allow a portion of the required parking for 46 Ocean View Avenue to be located on 44 Ocean View Avenue, and a coastal development permit to allow the proposed development in the non-appealable jurisdiction of the city's coastal zone. The project is exempt from environmental review under Section 15303, the new construction or conversion of small structures from the CEQA guidelines. With that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Plummer for a staff presentation.
Great, thank you. And thank you for searching to the plans. Pilar Plummer, Associate Planner with the City of Santa Barbara Planning and Zoning Division. So as discussed in the project scope, this involves 2 lots. So there is a coastal development permit that is being requested, as was noted. Typically those are done without a public hearing, so I'm just going to be referring to it in the scope of the overall modification, but I'll do an overview of the whole project and why that's triggering a coastal development permit. So we are in the non-appealable jurisdiction of the coastal zone. Again, this is 2 lots. So this is 44 Ocean View Avenue and then 46 Ocean View Avenue. They're owned by the same property owner, so that's why we're looking at it together, and also because the lots, while they are separate, do have a shared driveway access, and the modification that's being requested is to have some of the off-site parking for 46 to be located on 44, just in the context of what's existing on the site right now. per city records. On 44 Ocean View Avenue, there is a 2-story residence. And then there is another single-story residence here and another single-story residence here, as well as a 3-car carport. And then on 46 Ocean View Avenue, there is a permitted duplex and a 1-story residence back here. Both lots are at their maximum allowed density of 3 units per lot. And I do want to point out that accessory dwelling units, which is the subject of this review, are not equivalent to additional density. So there's no change in terms of how the city evaluates density for these 2 lots. One thing I do want to point out, it was discussed in the staff report, but during our internal review, it was determined that there was some as-built work that occurred on the property, one of which is this residence here has been converted to a second unit, so there is an ADU here, and that's the one that's being requested to be permitted via AB 2533. That's a government code that stipulates that if there's an accessory dwelling unit that's functioning prior to January 1st, 2020, the city has to permit it in its current configuration, even if it's not completely consistent with the city's local ADU ordinance. So that's there. There's some unpermitted decks. I'll say particularly on Unit 3 right here, you can kind of see there are decks in the interior setbacks here, as well as an unpermitted addition right here. Those elements, as well as some unpermitted deck area here and stairs on 46 Ocean View Avenue, are unpermitted per the city's archival set. So because those aren't directly related to the ADUs that I'm going to be covering, staff determined that those should be on a separate application. So they'll go through a separate planning application. There's an enforcement case that will be assigned to make sure that those are addressed, but those are just for context of other unpermitted work. That's not subject of this hearing, but just so you're aware of those. So the subject of this application is to replace the carport that's here. So before we were looking at the survey, now this is the archival set. So again, we have a 3-car carport here that's going to be replaced, and then there's some uncovered parking spaces here. Per city records, we have 5 spaces, and then again 3 on 44. So because we're in the coastal zone, you're required on multifamily unit properties to replace all existing parking on site. That's being replaced with an ADU structure. So they are proposing to replace all 5 parking spaces, as well as construct 2 new parking spaces, as this lot's going to have 2 special ADUs. And then on this lot here on 44, they're going to replace the 3-car carport with the 3 additional spaces plus 1 for the new special ADU that's going to be located here. So just going over that again. On 44, the carport with 3 spaces being replaced by a new special accessory dwelling unit. This is identified as Unit 5. As I already mentioned, this front unit is now going to be 1 residence with the ADU permitted via AB 2533. So that's Units 4 and 5. And then on 46, the 5 uncovered parking spaces are going to be replaced by 2 special ADUs. Where that leaves us is the site is constrained in a number of ways. So with a parking modification, the actual findings for it are here. So the Planning Commission, or the Staff Hearing Officer in this case, is qualified for Staff Hearing Officer review. A modification cannot be found inconsistent with the purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance and will not cause an increase in demand for parking space or loading in the immediate area. So that's the finding that the Staff Hearing Officer has to make in approving a modification. In staff's review of this, we felt very strongly that you needed to provide all parking that met demand. Otherwise, we would need a parking demand study. So in review with the city, the applicant did study different solutions. Ultimately, they did want to maximize the amount of ADUs that they could have on the property without having to do demolition of existing structures or potentially doing a podium level. which also might not work just because with this particular configuration, because it's multi-unit, they are limited to special ADUs, which do have a height restriction of 18 feet. So to provide parking underneath a structure could have been problematic in terms of meeting that height requirement. I do want to point out that all the special ADUs are under 18 feet. It varies from 15 to 18 feet. This structure is 15 feet and these are 18 feet. So when it comes to parking, since we're keeping the existing structures as well as maintaining the required amount of open yard space on the lot that's required, there was only a few locations that really worked for parking. If you've been out or seen the site, you also know that the topography slopes down quite a bit from Ocean View Avenue, and then both lots have a 50-foot width and a fairly narrow driveway. It's 20 feet, but while it satisfies transportation requirements, there isn't a lot of additional room to provide parking, say, for example, here, without eliminating one of the special accessory dwelling units or decreasing the size. I do want to also say all of the units that are new construction for the special ADUs are all under the 800 square foot maximum that is allowed. And then they are maintaining their open yard space that's required for the city back here on 46. And then on 44, it's here and here that they're going to be maintaining open yard space, but it meets the city's requirements. So the new parking space configuration is really mostly shown on this sheet here. So this is 46 and this is 44. Just given that they're going to be doing 2 new units here, this site was particularly constrained because, again, they had 5 spaces that are permitted. So they needed to replace 5 spaces and then construct 2 new parking spaces, 1 for each of the special ADUs. So that's a total of 7 spaces they're technically required to provide on 46 Ocean View Avenue. 44 Ocean View Avenue, they're only doing 1 special ADU, but they also had to replace their 3 existing spaces in here, plus install a new parking space for this, so 4. So what the applicant ultimately opted to request was a modification, just given that they were going to meet demand for the required amount of parking spaces, but some of them would need to be located off-site. And in staff's review of this, while modification is needed if it's all residential, we do have the option for off-site parking agreements or easements for commercial properties or mixed-use properties. Because this is residential, it does have to be on-site unless you get a modification. Staff was supportive of them doing some off-site parking on 44, 1, because it's jointly owned by one party currently, and 2, with a covenant of easement being recorded such that 46 Ocean View Avenue can maintain access to parking on 44, and because it's directly adjacent to the site. Obviously, it's all functioning really as one parking lot area, shared between the 2 lots, but ultimately all provided parking spaces for 46 are clearly accessible to them. There's no barriers or fencing or anything of that nature separating the 2 lots. And that's the subject of the modification. So staff did find that the modification would be consistent with the intent purposes of the title. 1, because they're meeting demand, and 2, because the standards for off-site parking, so for example, if you were doing a commercial or mixed use, we can permit a walking distance of up to 500 feet or up to 1,250 feet with transportation and parking manager approval. This is clearly less than that, so staff found it consistent. And that really covers the modification. As you already read, staff also found that the project was exempt per SEQA 15303 for new construction of the accessory dwelling units. And if you have any questions, I'm here. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to the applicant, Mr. Kuykendall and Bobby Walker, who did the plans. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ms. Plummer. That was a great staff presentation. I'll turn it over to the applicants if you have anything you wanted to add or share on the project. Okay, great. It certainly was. That's one of the best staff presentations I think I've seen. So thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Really thorough. I'm going to now open it up for public comment on this item. Ms. Carmen, do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Ms. Harris. At this time, we do not have anyone in the room with us for this item, and we do not have any participants online, and we did not receive any written correspondence for this item, so I'll give it back to you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Carmen. I'm going to go ahead and close public comment at this time. And then I have just a couple questions, really more clarification for the public that may be watching or interested in the item at a future date, and then some comments as well before I make my decision. So, Ms. Plummer, you did mention the easement, and I was hoping that you could just clarify for the public what would happen if either 44 or 46 Ocean View Avenue was sold to another party, and that party wanted to do something different on the lot?
Thank you for the question. Yes, so in the conditions of approval, which are attached to the staff report, there is a condition that staff has recommended the staff hearing officer include. So it's prior to zoning clearance on any building permit, a covenant of easement shall be processed and recorded such that if either parcel is granted separate ownership, access for vehicles and pedestrians to off-site parking is maintained. So in other words, the parking has to stay as permitted through the city. They must maintain access from 46 to 44, so there can't be any new barriers installed. They can't remove parking spaces because that's recorded and stays with the property regardless of who owns it. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Ms. Plummer. And if they were to decide to change the configuration of a unit or to demo or build something entirely different on one of the parcels and wanted to move the parking on a parcel, what would the process for that be?
Well, one, you would need authorization from both owners. Let's say if there was two separate owners. And two, if you're changing the parking configuration from the city's standpoint, we want to make sure that the amount of approved parking spaces are being maintained. So for example, 46 has a requirement of 7 spaces total. So that amount of parking spaces, what's permitted off-site, so they only have 3 right now. So 4 of the spaces are on 44. If they were to change a location, that would be acceptable as long as they went through the city's process and got that permitted and showed that they were still maintaining the required amount of parking. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. Plummer, for describing that for the public. I want to just sort of ask the applicants that are here with us today if you are, accepting of the conditions of approval and understand that easement condition that would be placed on the parcel and would go regardless of transfer of property.
Yes.
Okay, great. Great. Just had a minor in the staff report on page 5. I think it's under modification. I think we just want to change in sort of at the end of that paragraph, it had indicated 46, just change it to 44.
That's correct.
I know that's a minor piece. And then I wanted to clarify, I thought I had read that there were 8 parking spaces needed for 44 Ocean View in the staff report, but it is 7. Is that correct? Ms.
Yeah.
Plummer? Okay.
So just to cover again, for 44, they need a total of 4 spaces. 46 is 7 spaces.
Okay,
So,
great,
yeah.
great. So 7 spaces needed for 44, and then
7 spaces for 46.
I'm sorry, 7 spaces for 46. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay.
I do, yeah. I know, I'm gonna, yeah. So, thank you, Mr. Kuykendall. So I do have one recommendation also. It's not in the staff report, but I was brought to my attention by Mr. Kuykendall, and I agree with the suggestion. So on the conditions of approval, not sure exactly which page is in the staff report, but condition D, prior to certificate of occupancy, so D1, I'd recommend striking that. It says primary residence occupancy shall not be granted to the ADU until the primary residence has received C of O. That's not applicable because all units are existing. So we can strike that. So D2 would become D1. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Ms. Plummer. I am comfortable with that change and would like to include that change for this project. And then my only other question, can you describe for the public, given that there are a number of different units on the site and there are ADUs on the site as well, what a special ADU is and what that, I know you briefly mentioned the height difference, but if you could talk about that.
Special ADUs essentially, so one, when you have a multi-unit lot, there's different configurations you're allowed to do. Because the existing lots have 3 units, they're limited to the special ADU criteria, unless they were just doing a singular ADU. Because they want to do multiples, they can do 2 new construction special ADUs per lot. So that's again what they're doing for 46 and 44, they're just doing the 1. But a special ADU has different size limitations, different height limitations. So for example, a standard ADU, you could do a 2-story structure. And it's not to say that you can't do that with a special ADU, but you're limited to 18 feet. So that height limit becomes an issue. That's the primary distance. There's different standards for the unit configuration, maximum size, but ultimately it still has all the components of a regular ADU. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Ms. Plummer. So I'm going to go ahead. I've got a few comments. I am comfortable with the project. I visited the site earlier this week. I've also driven past Ocean View Avenue a number of times, so familiar with the general area and vicinity and the neighboring properties as well. While it is, additional units and additional development on the site, I do think it's consistent with the overall neighborhood in the area. And providing additional housing is certainly a need in the community. So I do appreciate the work being done on the property for that reason. I do want to point out, just anytime somebody comes, if with work that's unpermitted, and I recognize that this is under a different permit, but this is my opportunity to emphasize that it is really important to just come in and get the permit. And in the future, I hope that the property owner will choose to do that. Oftentimes the process results in just a lengthier time and more frustration on the applicant side, and certainly is more staff time than honestly is needed. And some of the changes, if they were done in a different way, could have just all been wrapped into one project rather than having to come back and forth to the city. So I do, that's a comment I make anytime somebody comes in with unpermitted work. I recognize that that's just the situation that we're in right now, and I appreciate that you are coming before me today for some of that. But just hope in the future that is not an issue on this property. So with that, let's see, I've got a few more notes here. And then just with AB 2533, the development of the ADU before 2020, I do recognize that. So I know I just made that comment, but I do recognize that is something that we will be, that will be permitted under AB 2533. So that is different from my comment around the unpermitted addition and decks and stairs. Let's see. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and make the findings for the modification. I find that the modification is consistent with the zoning ordinance. I do really appreciate staff's work along with the transportation planning team on looking at the parking configuration and how to make the parking work on the site without having to remove units, and also providing the units that my understanding is the applicant had wanted on the site. It is unusual, to have an easement on another property to provide parking. So I just want to make sure that when that condition is recorded and finalized, that it's very clear, and I know that staff will review it and make sure that it is clear that if future work is done, that either property owner would need to get consent with the other, and then also come in for any changes that are occurring on the project site. But with that, the project will meet the parking demand overall. So with the parking requirements on both 44 and 46 Ocean View Avenue, although there are some parking spaces that are on each of the other parcels, they will meet the overall parking demand. So that is, I do find that it's consistent with the zoning ordinance because of that. I also find that just sort of discussing the ADU at this moment, I know that's will be under the coastal development permit, but it meets the height limit of 18 feet. I asked Ms. Plummer to talk about the difference between special and regular ADUs and just sort of what that is, really just to sort of emphasize what opportunities exist for properties like this, and to highlight that is an opportunity that this property chose to take, and it is something that is acceptable under our zoning ordinance. So with the limitation of a height under 18 feet and under the 800-foot maximum square foot, the project does meet that. I also find that the project's consistent with the Coastal Act, that it has minimal adverse impacts. It's consistent with our local coastal plan. Again, just really providing the additional units on the site. It's a sloping site. It's also very hard to see other than, as you're going past, unless you're actually on the property. It is, you really aren't seeing much beyond the units that are immediately in front. So they are well screened there. And then the limitation on height also, I think, will mean that you won't actually see that increased development from Ocean View Avenue itself. So that's another benefit for the property. And then I do appreciate that the open yard space is still being maintained, or there will be some open yard area within that, and that the applicant will be pursuing another permit with staff to work on the decking and other elements of the site. So with that, with those comments, I'm going to go ahead and approve the modification. So that modification is to allow a portion of the required parking for 46 Ocean View Avenue to be located on 44 Ocean View Avenue. And my decision on that is, and then I also am going to make the finding that CEQA Section 15303 for the new construction or conversion of small structures on the site is consistent and is appropriate, allows the construction of accessory dwelling units in a residential zone. So my approval can be appealed to the Planning Commission for the modification. I'm going to take them in two parts here, so starting with the modification. So if you would like to appeal my decision on the modification, you may do so within 10 calendar days. You can either contact the planning staff at the phone number that's listed on the slide. Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Carmen, if you could move over, thank you so much. And then, or you can come in and file an appeal in person at the Community Development Department, or you can submit it via email or by first-class mail. It must be submitted within 10 calendar days of today's date, February 4th. Also, any member of the Planning Commission may suspend my decision within the same 10 calendar day period. And then I'm then going to move into item B, the coastal development permit. And I'm going to read this again, pursuant to the Municipal Code 28.44.110. When a proposed development involves the addition of an accessory dwelling unit, the application shall be reviewed by the staff hearing officer without a public hearing in accordance with subdivision J of Government Code 65852. The staff hearing officer shall not issue a decision until at least 10 calendar days after the notice has been provided. Following my decision of approval on the modification, I will announce that I will also approve the coastal development permit. And the coastal development permit is also exempt from further environmental review under Section 15303 of CEQA for new construction or the conversion of small structures. I find that the special ADU, as I mentioned in my comments, is consistent with our zoning code requirements and consistent with our local coastal plan. And so with that, I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting and thank the applicant and staff for the presentation and comments today. Thank you.